Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here, and great turnout. I'm Olivia Chow, your local member of Parliament, and we're here to say that we need safer trucks, and the best way to have that is to install Sideguards. So tonight we will hear from Matthew Remsky, who's a friend of Jenna Morrison. We will hear from Karen, Samantha, and Adam with describing their experience on losing a loved one. We will have a presentation about the latest scientific research from European countries on how good and how many lives can be saved by Sideguards. I will give you an update as what's happening to our big lobbying effort. And then Andrea is going to do a call to action about what we can do together. Okay? So, and then we'll open it up for question and answer. So our piece of it won't be too long. If you have any questions, remember them. If you have any comments, remember them. We'll turn over the meeting to you after we do a brief presentation. So, Matthew, all yours.
My name is Matthew Remsky, and I was, I don't really want to use the past tense. I've kind of discovered since my dear friend Jenna died that I don't really understand what it means to say that I was her friend or I am her friend. I've never really had this experience, although as a child, I was a church musician, and I attended hundreds of funerals as a singer and as a church organist. But to lose somebody so close to me has made me realize that there's a real deficit. We don't really know where the person is. You feel them so closely in your heart, and it doesn't really feel like the past tense at all. And in fact, when I call Jenna to mind, she seems very present to me. And in fact, as soon as her body disappears from the community, it seems as though her presence is even more felt, because everybody rushes in to fill the gap in some way. And to take up all of the functions and all of the sort of community service that was so dear to her heart. Other people rush in and fill that hole. The moment of her death is still very closely with me, and it's motivating me onwards, even as I ride my bike through the city, through this incredible fall that we've had, glorious for bike riding, this very mild winter that we've had, fantastic for bike riding. And as I'm in the riding lane and I'm sort of squeezed in between the parked cars and the vehicles that are approaching on the left, I understand now the vulnerability even more so. I think most of us travel through our lives with this very misguided sense of invincibility. And now I'm very aware, as I look over my left shoulder, that there's this gaping hole between the front wheels and the back wheels of tractor trailers that doesn't need to be there, and that ate up my friend. And so I'm also learning between November 7th, which is when Jenna died, and the present moment, what politics actually means. It's the sustaining over the long term of empathy. There's an incredible outpouring of grief at the beginning of people's realization of a tragedy. It's almost as if the body feels like it's undergone an amputation. And then slowly regular life seems to filter back in, and everybody who is not so profoundly affected as you were carries on in their normal discussions of the issue, as in well, the trucking industry will have a lot of difficult decisions to make with regard to attaching these side guards, and it costs a lot of money, and all of these logistical issues come up that really kind of gloss over or paper over the incredible resolve that we have at the moment of a tragic occurrence. And so I have now expanded respect and really kind of awe for people like Olivia, who are able to sustain this empathetic action for months and months and months at a time, and encourage us to do the same thing. That simple safety measures such as Sideguard implementation seem to be absolute no-brainers when they're considered in the wake of a tragedy. But somehow we have to keep the loving presence of the people that we've lost animated and really close in order for us to be really inspired to continue our actions. So I'm really happy to see that you've all come to support Olivia's bill and the various action items that we're going to bring up. And I want to point out a couple of people who have done a lot of work. Andrea Peloso is a fantastic organizer in this cause. I think Andy Garcia, I saw her come in from the bike union. And then you'll hear from these guys. And yeah, I think that's all I have to say. Thanks so much for coming. And Karen? Yeah.
Can I invite the people that are in the back on the side to come closer to us? There's a whole row of empty seats. We don't bite. Don't be scared of us. Those of you that are in the back looking for space. Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah, give us 1 second. So those of you just came, just coming in, come see. Oh, good. Thank you.
Matthew is more eloquent than I am. I'm going to be cheating here. My name is Karen McNeil Hartman, and my husband, Ulrich Hartman, was one of the fatalities of the result of a fight with a cement truck, September 11th, 2006. So I'm going to read this and walk you through our experience. And to my right is my daughter Samantha, who was 9 at the time, and my son Adam, who was 4 at the time. It's Monday afternoon, September 11th, 2006. My husband Ulrich called me before leaving work. He asked, could you pick up some buns so I can barbecue some sausage for dinner? I took it for granted that he was already planning our dinner. In our 14 years together, he had become chief cook. I was rushing out the door to take Samantha to her piano lesson, and I told him that I loved him and wished for the wind to be at his back. Who would have guessed that 2 hours later, I would be in a police cruiser on my way to Sunnybrook Hospital, praying and crying the whole way, hoping that he was going to be okay and I'd be able to look after him. But it turned out I was on my way to identify his body. Please imagine, if you can, coming home to my then 9-year-old and 4-year-old and having to tell them that their father was killed in an accident. And the words didn't come to me. I can't to this day remember what I said. I just knew that I was in the most difficult position I've been in my whole life, and I wished I didn't have to do what I had to do. Our 6'4" gentle teddy bear was taken from us. He was sucked under the cement truck. He didn't have a chance. For a long time we lived in shock. Friends rallied to fill in the gap, as Matthew mentioned. They brought food, they took the kids to their activities, they slept over, they slept with me because I was afraid of sleeping alone. They put the kids to bed and they allowed me to grieve. After the shock lessened, the real pain set in. Since Ulrich was killed, I've suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, complicated grief, panic attacks, and severe depression. And it's manifested in many weird ways. One of which was a fear of hospitals, which is ironic because as a nurse practitioner, I worked at Women's College Hospital for 20 years. I've not been back to work. As a widowed mom, I tried to keep things the way they were and failed miserably. Nothing was the same. Ulrich was not only my soulmate, he was my equal partner in everything, especially in raising our children. He was thoughtful, kind, smart, playful, and romantic, and as a dad, he was always there. He organized play dates, made it to every soccer game and every checkup. He taught himself how to braid hair on a Barbie doll so he could braid Samantha's hair. His care and devotion, these things too I took for granted. Many days since the accident, I've searched my soul to find reason for this senseless loss. In a letter that I wrote to Ulrich, January of 2011, I closed by saying, I am missing you every day and still don't believe that you will not walk in our front door one of these days. This is what lonely feels like. In the time since Ulrich's death, I've learned that sideguards on trucks save the lives of cyclists and pedestrians. A coroner's report in 1998 recommended mandatory sideguards on trucks, and if that recommendation had been implemented, Ulrich would still be here. After Ulrich was killed, I promised Samantha and Adam that I would see that sideguards were made mandatory on all large trucks. We honor Ulrich's memory by preventing further deaths. In November, Jenna Morrison and her unborn baby's lives were taken. In Victoria, BC, later that same month, a man in his 20s was killed by a truck while riding his bicycle. These are tragic, preventable losses. The Canadian government at every level has a responsibility to ensure the safety of all its citizens. It's a no-brainer. Like seatbelts and airbags, we can make this happen. To start with, we can talk about it amongst ourselves, we can sign petitions, we can contact our MPs, our MPPs, and local city councillors. Let them know that the safety of all persons using the roads should be priority. Safety of all persons using the roads. If you haven't done so, sign the petition. I know there's petitions as you come in, which are targeting Minister LaBelle, who is the Minister of Transportation, Infrastructure, and Communities. I'd just like to end by saying that I miss Ulrich every day. I ache for what might have been, and I am forever grateful for what we had. Thank you.
So my name is Samantha Hartman, and my dad was basically killed by a cement truck when I was 9. My dad, Ulrich Hartman, was a wonderful dad. He spent his days taking care of his family and friends. He used to do things like read me Harry Potter at bedtime and braid my hair. He would always put others ahead of himself, especially his family. On September 11, 2006, it was a normal day for me as a 9-year-old at the time. After my piano lesson, I was doing my homework when I heard the phone ring. My mom picked it up, and a few minutes later, I heard her call me from downstairs. I went down thinking it was one of my friends who had called me. Little did I know it was the most life-altering, earth-shattering phone call my family would ever receive. My mom, with tears in her eyes, told me, "Your dad has been in a serious accident. I have to go to the hospital." I immediately ran out of the room, grabbed a picture of my dad, and started to cry. I spent the next few hours trying to reach my mom at the hospital and figure out what was going on. Around 10 o'clock that night, my mom came home. I still had some hope at this point that he was alive, and that everything would be okay. But she sat me down and told me, "Your daddy fought hard to try to live. He tried to stay in this world, but he didn't make it. He had just died doing something he loved." The next few weeks, I didn't eat much, if ever. I spent my days in shock. I didn't go to school for weeks because I just didn't want to be with people. This accident could have been prevented if sideguards had been mandatory at the time. My life has been changed permanently. I didn't get to have my dad at my grade 8 graduation. I won't have my dad to see me grow up. I didn't get to have the embarrassment from my dad having an intervention with my first boyfriend. I won't get the chance to be taught how to drive by him. My dad won't be there when I graduate from high school and go off to university. I won't have my dad to walk me down the aisle when I get married. My children will never get to know their grandpa, and me, his daughter, will be left to spend most of her life not knowing him. Because of this event, my family has gone through other traumas. My cousin committed suicide. My mother, brother, and myself have gone through therapy. I have had eating disorders. If sideguards had been mandatory at the time, none of this would have happened, and I might still have my dad. But we, as a country, can still change this. We have opportunities to save other people's lives. We can prevent that life-altering phone call for a family. We can save mothers, brothers, fathers, and children just by implementing this law. I'm disappointed and hurt that it took several other deaths, including that of Jenna Morrison's and her unborn child, to take notice to this serious issue that has to be changed now. And even if it does cost a lot of money, is money really worth more than breaking families, hurting communities, and taking people's lives away?
My speech is a little bit different than theirs, but it's a similar point. Imagine that you are riding on a bicycle without a care in the world. Suddenly, a truck comes out of nowhere and you are trapped under the truck. That's what happened to my dad. He could have lived had there been sideguards on that truck. Sideguards are a safety feature which bounds pedestrians, cyclists, and motorcyclists away from a truck. Instead of getting them caught on the undercarriage. In Europe, these sideguards have been mandatory for decades. Every year, sideguards save lives in Europe, but not in Canada. A UK study comparing accidents between cyclists and heavy trucks showed a 23% reduction in deaths of cyclists after sideguards were made mandatory. In Canada, sideguards are not mandatory, and there hasn't been that 23% drop or reduction in deaths. And so, Jenna Morrison, her unborn baby, my dad, Minnow and Plum's dad, and Jessica Holman Price all lost their lives. After Jenna Morrison's death, Olivia Chow, a member of Parliament, reintroduced Bill C-344 to amend the Motor Vehicle Safety Act, making sideguards mandatory. I became involved in this cause because I really want to help prevent more deaths. I'm speaking tonight to raise public awareness of Bill C-344 and to tell you I haven't had my dad for 6 years. There are so many times every day that I have missed him. He's not there to pick me up from school, ask me how my day was, and help me with my homework. I miss his pizza, his gourmet sandwiches, and his chats at the dinner table. I miss his cheesy jokes, his hugs. I miss when he put me to bed, reading with me every night. I miss bike riding with him. Today we are here for a town hall meeting to help plan a nationwide bicycle ride and raising awareness of Bill C-344 to get passed. Working to change the laws of Canada makes me feel like I'm involved in something important. This is how I honor my dad. So please support Bill C-344 by contacting your MP and asking your family and friends to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. No, it's good. I'm not speaking yet. Tim has a presentation that shows you something about sideguards, what's happening in Europe. It's a very short presentation and it's excellent.
Okay, let me just grab the mic.
Okay.
Just. We're just gonna take it. Oh, just take it out.
Okay.
All right.
There we go.
That should work. Okay, so thank you first of all for the statements, for telling your stories. So now I want to give a little bit of a background in terms of the technicalities of sideguards and the history in Europe. So let's just take a snapshot of, maybe we can switch off the slide here. Yeah. Perfect. Okay, so this is a what I call the tale of two countries. So here in Canada, the most recent data that complete the picture from 2005, so I apologize for that. So population around 30-something million, around 700-something heavy trucks. So we're not talking about pickup trucks, but really the big ones that carry cargo. And back in 2005, 50 pedestrians were killed by trucks, 10 cyclists, and this is pretty much an average number. Like the number has not really been decreasing, has been more or less flat over the past 10 years. And so then when you break this down, that means for every 10,000 trucks on the Canadian roads, there are 8.4 pedestrians and cyclists that are killed every year. So then when you look at the situation in Germany, almost like 2.5 the population and almost 4 times as many trucks. And at the end of the day, of course, they also have a lot of pedestrians and cyclists being killed. But when you break it down to the number of trucks, it's only 5.8. So where's this difference? Why do more trucks with more population kill less people? And so and Sideguards is an important piece of the answer. So basically, in the European Union, or more namely the European Commission, has been very proactive in trying to make roads safer. I mean, for all kinds of different participants in traffic, but mainly helping people that either drive or walk or bike or even motorcyclists to be less at danger, less at risk when they collide with a truck. And so that actually started in the UK in the 1980s. They made side trucks mandatory on trucks in 1986. And then the European Union followed suit with a regulation in '89. And the way it works is basically the European Union tells its member states, hey, look, you have to put this into a national law, and you have to figure out how to do it, and you have 5 years to do it. And so then basically between '89 and '95, all the European member states introduced mandatory sideguards in their countries. And so basically from '95 on, all trucks in Europe had them. There are only very few exceptions. But that's not enough. They actually took more steps. So then, because the sideguards are only on the lateral side of the truck, and then they also made it mandatory to have those kind of protective barriers in the front, that was in 2000, and also in the back. And then another step was to reduce the speed of the trucks so that they cannot go faster than 90 kilometers per hour. And so it's kind of like an electronic device that blocks it. And then also that in one of the latest steps, they essentially made improved mirrors mandatory with the aim of reducing the blind spot. Because that's actually what happened. Like a lot of the cyclists, pedestrians that get killed underneath those truck wheels, they're actually not seen by the driver. Like they make a right turn while the cyclist or pedestrian is trying to cross the street, or they're also making a right turn. So that's also what happened to Jenna Morrison. And so in this picture, you see they're like a myriad of mirrors, and all those are mandatory in Europe. So this is another piece of the puzzle. And then if you look at the graphic at the bottom, kind of like shows how the blind spot has been reduced by introducing those different mirrors. And so the result of all this was that in an average country, basically the number of fatalities from blind spot collisions for cyclists was cut in half. So a little excursus there. So this is the situation in Europe. So the sideguards, we have the mirrors, and those underrun protections. What about Canada? Essentially, a lot of talking has been going on. As already was mentioned earlier by Karen, already in '98, the coroner for the region of Toronto recommended looking into the whole sideguard thing with the aim of making them mandatory. So, and then nothing happened. And then the city of Toronto brought the topic up again with Transport Canada. And it was, for example, in 2006, the Works Committee of the city recommended it. And they only got a negative answer from Transport Canada. So then also in 2006, when Jeanette Holman, I believe, her daughter, when she got killed, she started a campaign. So that was one of the first grassroots efforts here in Canada to change legislation to make it mandatory. And that was also the year that Olivia got elected to Parliament for the first time, and she introduced a bill to make sideguards mandatory, but it got defeated. So then in 2010, Olivia brought in another bill, same results. It was not adopted. So then last year, partially in response to all those killings, that all those fatalities have taken place, then the coroner for the province of Ontario said publicly that they would investigate the cyclist deaths. And actually, Olivia's office also submitted research data to help with this investigation. So then also this, in response to the death of Jenna Morrison, then this grassroots group was formed, safetrucks.ca, and I can only strongly recommend that you go and check out the website, where we have all that research there and tools to get active, links to the petitions, and so on. So and then, of course, Olivia reintroduced the bill, this time under the moniker C344, and trying to build up support. So then, what about the numbers? Because initially, last year in the fall, when Olivia brought the whole topic up again, there was quite a negative response coming, for example, from the trucking industry, and in various media, it was a little bit questioned, like, do we really need those sideguards? And then, as already was pointed out, study after study shows, yes, they actually do reduce fatalities. So, for example, in the UK, they compared what happened before the sideguards got mandatory and afterwards, and overall reduction in cyclist fatalities of 23%. And then when they travel in the same direction, which is actually the most common one, it's actually even much higher, 61. And then in Germany, since the sideguards became mandatory in '95, which was like the last year of the phasing in, since then, fatalities for cyclists dropped by 40% and pedestrians 20%, which is quite sizable. And then this is kind of like not an outlier. Basically, this is a trend that you can see for the whole European Union, because obviously they have it on all the trucks. And so the number of cyclists that got killed has dropped dramatically. Like since '95, almost a third less. And which can be attributed to the sideguards, but also to the mirrors, to the sensors that we talked about earlier. So to kind of like get a little bit more into the details here, what are actually those sideguards? And you can maybe see it on those pictures. So basically it's some kind of barrier that blocks that space between the axles, between the wheels. And so there are two common types. So one is called railside, where you essentially have two horizontal metal bars. And that was the one that was first introduced in the UK and then through the EU regulation. And they kind of work, but then the problem is, especially when you have a higher speed, the space in between those two horizontal barriers can still be fatal for a cyclist or a pedestrian that gets into it. So much safer is actually if you have kind of like a flat front, like a flat sheet of metal or plastic that can withstand the force, and then it's easier for the pedestrian or cyclist to bounce off. So both types are legal, but various studies have shown the closed ones are actually much better, and in various countries there are efforts underway to actually make those closed sideguards mandatory. And it's actually being investigated by the European Commission. So hopefully within the next couple of years, this will be the standard that is mandatory. And then also what the European Union is doing, they're pouring quite a lot of research money into this. Basically, they give money to universities and researchers, institutions, and say, hey, how can we make it safer? How can we reduce the number of fatalities even more? And that's another approach that we haven't seen here in Canada at all. So then you can also take it a step further. In addition to just protecting cyclists and pedestrians when they collide with trucks, you can also get some environmental benefits by installing the sideguard system. Essentially, we're talking about those flat ones that reduce the drag that is created when the truck is moving down the road. And by improving the aerodynamics, of course, that means you use less fuel, less greenhouse gases. So it's reduced costs for the trucking companies, and it's good for the environment, and because there are less carbon emissions. So it really does add up. So back in the 1990s, essentially around that time when those sideguards became mandatory, there were some first tests. Okay, how can we make those sideguards aerodynamic? And there was a fuel reduction in fuel consumption around 4 to 5%. So that was only the first step. And since then, a number of researchers and universities and private companies have done research, have improved the prototypes, actually commercialized them. So they're actually being sold and installed in Europe as we speak. And with those, you get an average reduction anywhere between 7 and 15%. There actually have been some scientific studies with up to 20% fuel savings. So we're actually talking about quite a lot of carbon emissions that could just be saved by making those mandatories. And so what do those aerodynamic sideguards look like? I think of like a sheet of plastic, but it's like high-tech plastic, because it has to withstand a force of 1,000 kilonewton. I'm not a physicist, but it's almost equivalent to like a ton crashing against that barrier. And so they last 20 years. So that's well beyond the lifespan of a trailer or a truck that the thing is actually installed on. And so what do they cost? Anywhere between $600 and maybe $2,600. And so, and even when you take those more conservative estimates, like after 3 years maximum, you actually have the money back when you're the trucking company who installs the sideguard. So there's a real environmental benefit and also economic benefit that goes along with this increase in safety for pedestrians and cyclists. And so, and it's not just for those big trucks, the semi-trailers that you see, the tractor-trailer combinations, but you can also install those sideguards on the smaller ones, like the delivery trucks that you see especially in the cities. Same thing, the fuel savings work there as well. And so, as I mentioned, different companies and universities have been working on those designs, and so they have come up with different prototypes. They sell them under different brand names, but it's already a reality in Europe. And so the question is, why can't we do this here in Canada? Like, can we get some Canadian manufacturers to do the same, essentially do it as a licensing, or even if they're not willing or not able to, maybe then get the European companies to sell it here? And there are actually some promising interaction has taken place. Like, we've talked to some manufacturers here in Canada, and they actually would like to cooperate and would like to talk to Transport Canada how to produce those sideguards here in Canada. So, and then if you install those sideguards on all the trucks in Canada, I'm sorry, all the tractor-trailer ones, and you get an annual fuel savings of 5%, which is really modest because with other ones you can actually get 7–9% easily. And with the current fuel consumption, that would add up to a reduction of 400 million liters per year. And it's more than 1 million tons of carbon dioxide that we could save just by installing them. So, and then of course, improve road safety for all. I mean, it's for cyclists, for pedestrians, but also for motorcyclists, even for cars when they crash into the truck from the side. So there's a clear case for it to make, and there are dozens of studies. I can only recommend go to the website safetrucks.ca. We've uploaded a lot of the studies there if you want to read the originals, and also a number of summaries that kind of like give you the key points. That's pretty much it from my side.
Thank you. Can we have the lights back on? Lights back on. Good. Thank you. Feel free, those people that are late and come, we have a few more seats up in the front, so those that are standing, feel free to come up here. I have a very brief thing to say, not a whole lot, so it's great to see so many of you here, and to be here to feel the energy and the love and the need to move forward and take action and not just all talk. It's really quite encouraging and inspirational from Adam, Samantha, Karen, and Matthew. I just want to give you an update of where things are at, and with a little bit of history. You saw that we've introduced the Sideguards issue over and over in the House of Commons. And, but something is changing. In the past, when I raised it, there was no discussion at all in the House of Commons. And lately, when I'm raising it, the minister is saying, if it really saved lives, I'm willing to look at it. I'm willing to consider it. And the same thing with the trucking industry. I've met with the trucking industry twice, face to face, and I also had a conference call with them. My wonderful staff, Tim, armed me with all the research data you just saw, with footnotes and all. And how can you say no to a 61% reduction of fatalities of cyclists if you're going along the same way? That's the UK study. For pedestrian in Germany, another 20% reduction. So it saved lives, and you just saw that not only does it save lives, it actually is good for the environment. It saved fuel, 9% on average. And it pays itself back in 2 to 3 years. So it's safer for cyclists, for pedestrians, it's good for the environment, it's good for their pocketbook. So the trucking industry went from saying absolutely no to they're willing to listen, they're willing to work with us. So I've invited them to the Transport Committee. The Transport Committee is about to study emerging technologies. Well, this is an emerging technologies. So I've invited manufacturing companies, Trucking Alliance to come and speak to the House of Commons Transport Committee so that I could take this issue up to all the members of Parliament. We have Also, we have presented since 2006, since I've been in the House of Commons, we have hundreds and hundreds of petitions, we have motions, we have private members' bills. Some of you have written to your Member of Parliament. Some of you may even have talked to your Member of Parliament. We want to take the emotions and the energy that we have here in this room to say to our Members of Parliament, no more senseless death. We want to make sure that people are safe and it's good for the environment. Someone just reminded me, Jack Layton in 1996 had a, we saw the first, not the first, but we noticed a death of a woman on Commissioner Street hit by a truck on similar situation. And at that time we were pushing for 1,000 kilometers of bike lanes. And I started thinking about trucks. And then of course the coroner's inquest recommended Sideguards. So this has been a long campaign and we're gonna keep going. I've met with the Ottawa cycling group, advocacy group. They immediately jump on board. I've met with the Motorcycle Association. They're considering supporting us. I went to British Columbia and Vancouver last weekend. The Vancouver cycling group with 13,000 members and the British Columbia Cycling Committee are all on side. So you're seeing that we are getting support from coast to coast to coast. And of course, our friend Jessica's mom have been pushing in Quebec, have been pushing in Newfoundland. So lots is happening. What we want to do, I went over to ask the minister. I said, are you willing to support this? Are you willing to consider this? And he had an open invitation to me and said, Olivia, I'm a cyclist. Sit down, we'll meet. I haven't taken up his offer yet because I want to build such a strong case and have all of you involved and have as many people behind us as possible. So our Vancouver folks, after I met with them, they said, you know what, the best time is in May because the Bike to Work Week is coming in April and May, and we'll have so much energy at that time that we can coordinate ourselves, that maybe we could push the minister sometime in May so that there is a big international conference in Vancouver in June, mid-June, that if he wants to make an announcement there, we will applaud it. We'll give him the venue, right? In front of all the cyclists, advocates across the country and all the international guests, he can make the announcement. Wouldn't that be amazing if we can get that? So it's up to you tonight to discuss how we can take action. And to lead that discussion, let me bring to you Andrea Palacio to talk about updates on the action that you've been taking and what we can do together.
So hi everyone. Wow, this is nice to see everyone from here. Well, basically, when our friend Jenna passed away, we had a ride, which I know some of you were at, and the outpouring of support for that ride for Jenna from the community was incredibly touching. There was probably 50 people who printed up posters and just randomly posted on themselves. Some people are here tonight who did an amazing job. Elizabeth in the back was really helpful. And people shared things on Facebook. And we've since then had some open houses where we've also launched the Olivia Side Truck Guard petition. We've gotten a lot of petitions that have been signed. So we're going to continue to organize and have events where we get people to get together and get people to sign petitions. We're also working on a petition locally within Toronto for bike lanes. And there's also, come June, a lot of other really fun things that are going to be happening with cycling. And so all of these are an opportunity for you to get involved. If you have 5 seconds or if you have 5 hours, it really doesn't matter, it's all helpful. So I'll be here at the end, and I can give you, there's a safe streets 4, number 4 Jenna at gmail.com. There's also another mailing list at the back. And there's also a lot of petitions to take away to get signed for safe truck guards. So I hope you will get involved.
Thank you. Now it's your turn. Question, comments, ideas, get your creativity together. I'm sure you have ideas what we can do together. I think Tim or Susan are taking notes, or Andrea, someone is taking notes. We'll record your ideas. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question, which is, does anyone know of similar measures or what is happening in the big country across the border, the United States? And if there are groups there that we can connect with, or what are the rules that are currently there? Because I imagine that's a huge issue.
That was actually the first thing the trucking industry alliance said to me after I presented all the data. They said, gee, this looks really good. However, he didn't quite say that, we tend to follow the US guidelines. I raised that after my meetings. I raised it in Vancouver, and they said they were going to connect. No, we have not connected with the US trucking industry. And because our certification, Transport Canada certification, follow the US, I think it's pretty important that we do the same. In my meeting in Vancouver, they said that they will be, because a lot of the US cycling advocates are coming to the Vancouver conference, they're contacting them anyway. So if any of you have any connections with cycling advocacy group in the United States, please, please connect with them. That video, that presentation is going to be up on safetrucks.ca. So any of you can take that, use it as your traveling roadshow, and you can present it to your friends. You can have your own meetings. You can bring it to your member of parliament. You know, you can just present. That's a very good question. Some comments, ideas. Don't be shy. Questions? Yes.
I have an idea. It's not specific to the Sideguards, but just for general traffic stuff and things like introduction of new things like bike boxes that drivers aren't aware of, or how to deal with cyclists making a right-hand turn or left-hand turn, things like that, that a lot of people who got their driver's license ages ago probably didn't even consider, is doing an actual campaign where cyclists or drivers can hand out something to, like, I mean, I've often had a driver turn right in front of me when they're not supposed to. So something that can be given to those drivers to educate them, because they always just look really strange at you, right?
Like it's your fault.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So something to educate people that you can just hand them on the spot.
Do we have anyone from the cycling team, any staff from, is Sean here? No. Or Barbara Wentworth? Sorry?
Are you looking for city staff?
Yeah, because they were, Sean, and actually Barbara is the cycling safety coordinator, Barbara Wentworth, and they've been running different workshops and different campaigns. There's a Mind the Gap campaign. They did one on, I was as the chair of the cycling committee at that time. You know, in taxis, they now have a sign saying, before you open the door, you know, watch the bike behind you. That was the cycling committee. Now, our wonderful mayor canceled the cycling committee. First thing he did, but that's okay. We are strong anyway. Just because we don't have a cycling committee in the city of Toronto, we'll organize ourselves. My wonderful local councillor in this area, Mike Layton, started his own cycling committee. So those education and those campaigns, I think it's really important to do. Absolutely. Some ideas?
I understand, just responding to that point, I understand there was an effort to update the Ontario Driver Handbook to address more cycle training, that drivers are more aware of cyclists in their training.
Yeah, because that's the Highway Traffic Act and the that's Ontario, plus the Driver's Handbook. Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Have you considered to involve places like, for instance, Mountain Equipment Co-op or G-Adventures or tour companies that all deal with cyclists that may not be organized in places like the Cyclists Association or whatever, but who on a recreational or vacation basis use their bike, but also would be, of course, using their bikes on an everyday, you know, way to work or whatever. And therefore would have a great interest. They use it recreationally every day in the summertime along the boardwalk. Well, they have to get to the boardwalk, so I'm sure they're very interested in getting there safe and back as well. And, you know, for instance, also the Mountain Equipment Co-op, they have like a bulletin board, and I'm sure they might sponsor, you know, maybe events even, or, you know, have another platform that they can reach people who are normally not involved in this type of issue.
So we is really you. Those of you, can I, right now, Andy, there are a few people that are involved in the central campaign, right, Karen and others, but we need a lot more volunteers. Andy, do you want to come and, from bike unions, talk about the kind of outreach you've been doing? Absolutely. Mountain Equipment Co-op will let us petitions and all. I stood on Saturdays, because usually there's long lineups, right? Especially in the summertime. You stand there and almost every person, you ask them to sign the petition, will sign. You just loudly explain what it is and they will all sign. You can have 2 or 3 petitions and it just, and Mountain Equipment Co-op will absolutely let you do that, will let you put up signs. They have long supported cycling activities, and can I just, those of you that are now part of this, the cycling, these Sideguards, safe trucks, can I see your hands up? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then Matthew, 6, 7. So we have 7 of us, and there's only that much things we can do. If you want to join our campaign, this will be amazing. We need a lot more volunteers, which is why it's one of the reasons why we want to have this meeting. Other than explaining the background, and we want you to help us out. So some more ideas, and then before you leave, I'm going to ask you to consider whether you want to join our team or not. Okay? You have lots of ideas, great, okay. I'll start from here and then move down. And you have, we'll let Adam speak first.
It's actually a bit of a question. We all know what it means to most of the other speakers, but I'm curious, what exactly got you involved in this cause?
Wow, budding journalist. I'm a year-round cyclist. I don't have a car, so I rode my bike here. I ride my bike everywhere. I've been riding my bike since I was 13. I came close being, well, I've been doored 3 or 4 times, but that's standard stuff. I haven't been doored in the last 10 years because I assumed they're going to open the door, so I slowed down. If there's people inside the car, I assume they're going to open the door, so I slowed down. I have a lot of friends that have been wiped out on, you know, people turning right hands on them, or on the tracks, and I've been to a lot of, not a lot, I've been to enough memorials that it is so unnecessary. Some of these deaths are preventable. And cyclists and pedestrians, we're the smallest on the street. You have these cars and trucks, and they are intimidating. And one move they have will just squeeze you between those wheels. So when I was the chair of the cycling committee, I started noticing a lot of that. And Jack and I used to go to, every time there's a cyclist death, we would go on the ride, memorial ride, and then after a while we thought, oh my God, there's too many memorial rides. There are too many ghost bikes. We need to do something to improve the safety of cyclists. And you feel it on the street. You feel it when there's a big truck beside you. You just, ooh, they're really big. And I see the space in between those wheels. And I thought, you know, it can just easily get slipped in. So that's why I'm involved, because I've been a cyclist all my life. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Did I pass? Some questions, yeah.
I was just gonna ask, when we leave here and go back to our schools, our workplaces, or what are we, like, how can we help to further the, not like, raise awareness, I know, but are we raising money to, I don't know, help pay for any of this, or are we getting petitions? Like, what can we do specifically?
Great question, thanks, Mandy. From a very basic but tangible thing that you could do is to take petitions with you, and on your spare period or your lunch hour or after school, have your friends sign the petitions. Those petitions go to the Minister Lebel, and they're something that he can see with people's names on it, and he can't deny that this is an issue that many people find really important. And it's not going to be swept under the carpet, and he's not going to get away with mumbling a few comments, a few nice words of, yeah, you know, safety is very important, blah, blah, blah. So the best thing you can do without it costing money is to have a petition signed. I think after 25 signatures, they can be dropped in the mail. You don't need postage, and they go directly to his office. And as more people do that, obviously he's softening because he knows we're on his tail.
So there's not really.
Also, every 25 names, the petitions, because it's addressed to the House of Commons, must be read out in the House of Commons. So, which means that we could, if we have enough petitions, that every day in the House of Commons, issues of cyclist safety can come forward. And we could have one day, we could have 15 members of Parliament, or 20 members of Parliament, or 30 members of Parliament, depending how many petitions we get, talking about Sideguards. So lots of things you can do. Over here, and over here, and over here, and then I'll come back to you. Yeah. I'm going to take 3 or 4 things, and then 3 or 4 comments, and then I'll come back.
Can I just interrupt before you?
Yes, please.
We're now going to pass around petitions so that if you want to take them away with you, you can, and you can send them right to the House of Commons in Ottawa for free. And we're also passing around a sign-in sheet, and if you would like to volunteer, put a star beside your name. Please continue.
Andy, can you want to sit up here and tell us what Bike Union is doing also? Can I just ask, we have lots of people here. How many of you are willing to join our team so we don't feel as alone?
I'm already in it.
You're already in it? Oh, great, great. Look around you. Look around you. Give yourself a big round of applause. Wow, that's great. Thank you. So those of you that put your hands up, as we put your, circulate that, we'll put your name in if that you want to put a star beside your name, then we'll call you for the next meeting. We're going to take 3 or 4 comments, and then you tell us what you're up to, okay? So this gentleman here.
So I'm actually an American visiting from Texas, of all places, and I work in bike advocacy. And
wow.
I probably will be going to Vancouver, but before that, I'll be going to the National Bike Summit, which is every year in Washington, D.C., where in mid-March. So that would be a key time. Unfortunately, this kind of thing has not made a blip on the national bike advocacy radar in the U.S. We're focused on restoring funding cuts to federal programs that fund safe routes to school and walking and biking. So it'd be a hard thing to sneak in now. I've followed bills you've introduced since 2006, and you know, it would be really great to coordinate something. So there are strong national groups in the U.S. for biking. There's also one thing that might be a suggestion for your campaign. One thing that's been really strong for the U.S. is having bike industry leaders, such as the president of Trek, going and lobbying as a business leader, not as a cyclist. But here you have Cervelo, you have Da Vinci, you have Axiom, pillars of the Canadian economy that have a vested interest in cycling safety, and you know, where are their voices on bills like this?
Great idea. Please feel free to take our traveling roadshow, that if you see anyone that might be interested, present them.
Sure.
Okay. Some comments. This gentleman here, and then we'll come back here. Yeah.
I just had a question. Has there been an analysis made for addressed to the insurance industry? If there's enough risk reduction, you could make the argument that trucking companies can save on insurance if you get them involved. Has that analysis been done?
No, we haven't, but we'll come back on that. I see a few more hands here. Let's take a few more questions, and then we'll come back. This gentleman, and over here, and over there, and I'll come back to you. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
So I lived in Germany for a number of years, and what I found also interesting is that there's a law that trucks are not even allowed to pass each other, which just goes beyond another safety consideration. Also, I was speaking to Tim beforehand, and I've collected a number of different images of flatbed trucks, dump trucks. They have something called a mega truck down there, which is basically a tractor-trailer, which is in Europe as well, but they've all got the sideguards, and those are license-free images, and we'll make those available as well through safetrucks.ca.
You have to speak a bit louder. Those people that are speaking to each other, keep your voice down so we can hear you. Go ahead.
I'll try.
Okay.
I'm quite curious. You've obviously tried putting a bill like this forward before, and you got a pretty strong no. So I'm wondering, what else did they...
It wasn't a no. It just ran out of time.
Oh, and they just...
It never got voted on.
Oh.
It doesn't require a change of legislation. It just requires a change of regulation, so it doesn't have to come through the House of Commons. Tomorrow, if Danilo Bell waked up in the morning and said, okay, then he could have staff draft a very simple regulation, and it can be done. It doesn't have to be approved by the House of Commons.
Okay, so did they say anything else about what they thought of it? The naysayers, did they give you any reasons for why they would want to proceed with it? Because I can only imagine that they'll pop back up again eventually.
The research is not conclusive, they said. I'll come back to that. I have a few more questions, a few more comments in the back over there. This gentleman in the back, no? Over here? Yeah, both of you, go ahead.
I'm wondering, the research that was shown before was about specifically civilian and bicycle and possibly motorcycle, I'm not quite sure, related fatalities. But I'm wondering if these protective measures will also add to automotive safety, so car drivers. And if that's the case, that's a whole other group of manufacturers, of